A good friend of mine had a conversation with me and said to me, do I know the story of the difference between the chicken and the pig? And I said, no. Welcome, everybody, to another session of Visualize with Vik. I get excited about these sessions because they enable me to think a little bit deeper. They also enable me to do a little bit of research, and I'm hoping that you're experiencing the same. And if you are, please subscribe and click on the notification button so that you're notified when we actually put up some of these videos. So, what was I going to talk about today? Well, I was actually going to continue from where we left off the last time, which was a conversation really around wanting for and wishing for. And for those of you who haven't watched that, please go ahead and watch it. Because what I was trying to show is that there is a difference between somebody wishing something for you and wanting something for you. Watch it so that I don't blow it for you, because I think it's important that you watch it from beginning to end. And it'll lead into this as well, but you will catch this anyway, even if you haven't watched it. I thought that we would talk about this construct of committed and involved. And just before COVID came along, my wife and I had been going through quite a bit of introspection around a number of things. And in that time when we were introspecting about a number of things, a good friend of mine had a conversation with me and said to me, do I know the story of the difference between the chicken and the pig? I said, no. And they then went on to say that, well, the difference between the chicken and the pig is that one is involved and one is committed. And I still didn't get it. And until they further described that to say that in order for the pig to give you breakfast, they have to sacrifice themselves. Whereas the chicken, all they have to do is lay an egg. And it was an interesting explanation and an interesting diagnosis, because I was able to take that and move it to a whole different number of facets of my life and my wife and I's life in terms of friendships and relationships and a number of other things, and started looking at them between the lens of, is this commitment or is this involvement? And wow, what a difference it made. I think when we particularly enter relationships, we diagnose them in terms of their favorability on things like frequency, in terms of how often we're in touch with each other, in terms of how we feel when we are together, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then we have those other groups of individuals who we may not be as frequent with, and we may not necessarily bond in the same depth. And funnily enough, those may be the people who are wanting for you, not necessarily wishing for you. And again, you'd need to, go and hear a little bit of what I was saying about that. But also, it ties into this element of saying that, is commitment frequency? Involvement can be frequency, right? And when involvement is frequency, we give it that sense of, this is, something a little bit greater than maybe what it is. But involvement is not necessarily commitment. There are lots of examples of where you can do things where you're involved. Participate is another word you could use, where you're there, but you're not necessarily committed. And commitment is not something that you need to measure with frequency, because commitment can be a once-off thing. Take a bodyguard who stands in front of you and takes a bullet just the once. That's commitment, and they may not be able to do it again, but that's an example of it. And I think what happens with the constructs of commitment is that because it's not measured on levels of frequency, we miss it. We miss people who are committed to us. We miss levels of commitment that we can define even within ourselves of things that we do, because we assume, because we're not doing them regularly enough, that we're not committed. And therefore, I urge you to have a deeper diagnosis of not only the things that you do, but the people that you engage with, to understand, Are they engaging through involvement, or are they engaging with commitment? Now, here's the thing about involvement and commitment. And one of the words that has come to me that really resonates with me quite profoundly, if you want to know the difference, or if you want to experience the difference. I think the word is more experience the difference than know the difference. With commitment, you need to submit. Now, when you know you're committed to something, you don't know the outcome. You don't have an anticipation of the outcome. So when, let's go into vaccine conversations. When we had this terrible pandemic and vaccines came out, and those that took the vaccines because, without even knowing what the outcome was going to be, felt that this was a commitment that they needed to give in order to protect not only themselves, but their families and their communities around them. It was an undeniable fact that as a consequence of this pandemic, people were being affected and affected by proximity, by behaviors, that this pandemic was being spread and this virus was spreading simply because of the way our behavior was. And that a lot of our behavior is not behavior that was wrong, but behavior that we were conditioned to. And a lot of lives were lost. And I feel that, like a member of the army, when they join, they don't make a conscious decision to decide the end outcome of their decision to join the army. They know that they are doing or feel or believe they're doing the right thing, right? Irrespective of the consequences. And that, for me, is commitment. Where you get involvement is when you have the occasion to be able to decide if, maybe, perhaps, probably, could be. That is involvement, because with that, you've got scenarios of exit and entry at any point that you feel like it. So go ahead and think about it. I want you to think about the engagements that you're in, but I also want to think about your behaviors, and I also want you to think about you as a person, to the extent to which you will define your commitments and also be able to assess your involvements, but also doing that with a lens of relationships, whether they be siblings, friends, cousins, family, colleagues, etc., etc. With that, I leave you. I hope that was going to give you a bit of food for thought. And until we speak to each other again, take care.